Okay. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm still getting things situated and I look beat up because I've just been so busy. But it is time for happy hour. I am less in a whiskey mood today, which is a little unusual for me. So I'm having a beer because I ran out of Killian's Irish Red is like the only beer I like. But I had to make do with Sam Adams Winter Lager. So I hope you guys have something to drink. Doesn't need to be alcoholic, but you can sit back, relax, have fun, and talk about ABA for a little while. I don't know how long we'll go today, but we'll see. All right. So, what has been going on in the groups? Because that is the main thing I usually talk about in ABA Happy Hour. Before we start with that, I wanted to get into the forum that launched. Was it a week ago? Maybe a week ago. Not more than a week ago. Very recently, and part of why I'm so tired is there was a debacle, if you will, a kerfuffle in our Facebook group, BCBA Resources. Comments, posts were getting reported as spam or like community violations, where they thought it was like fraud or phishing schemes. Like I could see why posts got taken down, but they didn't give me like a really good explanation as to what the post was. And I'm not always able to see the posts that are automatically getting removed. So, one thing to understand, sorry, I had a frog in my throat, is I have spam filters in the group that are very, very specific to bots and spam that come and like descend on the group and make it annoying and unusable. And if it annoys me, I get rid of it because I don't know. But apparently, what annoys me annoyed other people because you guys like the group. So I got rid of the annoying stuff. So I have filters to do that. And you guys know they're related to like taking the exam and study guides and those kinds of things. So as long as you avoid that, you're kind of good to go. I couldn't really tell why Facebook was removing some of them because I never got to see the comment or post they removed. But I know a bunch of the ones they removed for community violation was the CEU I did a month ago on the burnout vaccine. It was just a behavior analytic treatment of Seligman's learned helplessness research from the 60s that I was matching up with stuff that Murray Sidman was working on kind of at the same time. And these two groups that were running parallel and how that relates to organizational behavior management, so on and so forth. Really, really interesting. I want to offer it again because it was super cool. But definitely not a community violation or anything in the realm of community violations. So that was confusing to me, if I'm being honest. So I contacted them a bunch of times. They basically were saying that, like when I got people on the phone, because that's like how much time I spent on this, I was on the phone with Facebook 3 separate times. I have the times and dates written down here. But all the reps were like, oh, no, this is definitely wrong. AI is removing the comments or something's up, but we'll get it fixed. They absolutely don't get it fixed, which is a little bit of a problem, if I'm being honest. So, since they're not getting that fixed, the group is under attack by like misflagging links to my webinar as community violation somehow or stuff like that. I can't rescue the group by myself. I've run out of things that I can do personally. So on my site, I made a kind of like a mirror forum, is what it's called. And so, sorry, I just got distracted by something in the office. I made a forum that will mirror the Facebook group. It's private. The only people that I'm allowing in this group are ones that I've personally verified or BCBAs. So I can only do that so much. Like there's definitely ways around the verification process. But if we were getting targeted by like anti-ABA groups or misreporting spam and stuff like that, I find it very unlikely that people who are doing that sort of thing are going to sign up for my site to become a member, find someone's ABA or BACB certification number and name, and then sign up as them. But then I charge 99 cents a month for a very specific purpose. And it's 90%, because they would also have to put in their name and address from like some form of payment, either PayPal or a credit card, and that all has to match. So if that matches, and I do look up everyone's certification number that they enter before I approve them on the BACB's site, on the Find a Certificate, to make sure it matches the name that they gave me. So I don't think that people that are harassing people who practice ABA are going to go through that many steps necessarily. So that's the hope. It just got started. There's about 30 people, plus minus 5, I don't know exactly the number, who are like totally signed up, totally verified, have the verified, like the blue check little badge. So now we just have to get going and start posting stuff, but I'm really excited about it. It took 2 years about before my big ABA Facebook group kind of like caught on and started growing so rapidly. So I think the first few months, there's not going to be a ton of posts, but as we get going, it should get more active. And I'm really excited about having like a private space for us to talk about ABA. If someone posts something that they shouldn't have, it's a much smaller scale. I can see it and remove it and take it down before it gets kind of anywhere really unacceptable. And we don't have to worry about this, like, I'm sure there's a word for this in cybersecurity or something, but basically harassment for being behavior analysts. Because that is the opposite of what I want for you guys in the group. I want you to have like a place you can go and relax and like have a beer and talk about ABA, like what I did when I was a clinical director with my team is kind of what I'm trying to create for you guys. So that is number one for interesting things. I don't know why I keep like losing my voice. I'm so sorry. Number two is we are partnering with a recruiting firm that specializes in recruiting BCBAs and LMHCs, those kinds of professions, because some of you did want job posts, but the recruiters were posting like all day, every day. Like the whole group was becoming job posts. So I had to make it no job posts were allowed. But I think if there's like one person recruiting only for ABA jobs and it's only allowed 1 or 2 days a week, then that's like manageable and it kind of allows everyone to be happy. So you will see our partner recruiter. It's called Take a Seat. I looked into them. I spoke with the owner on the phone and everything seems to be pretty good on the up and up. They've worked with people that I know and with agencies that I worked with or at in Massachusetts. So I'm hoping that works out pretty well. I think it'll be good. Okay, I think that's all the updates. I'm not sure. It's been hectic and crazy, which is why the no makeup, like that's the only nice thing about TikTok is you can look like garbage and they have so many filters that you just look like you did your hair and put on your makeup, but it is not in the cards for me today. Okay, so what is going on in the group? It was a busy day in our group. The first post is more about pandas. The pandas stuff, why? Like what, again, like what does this add to your case conceptualization, your functional assessment, your analysis? I don't know that this pandas syndrome thing is worth all the like extra calories you're putting into it. I'm not sure there's a payoff because it may not change your functional assessment or your treatment plan at all, whether or not you know someone has it. It's just a mentalistic construct. So do with that what you will. I looked it up. I couldn't find anything evidence-based about it that was terribly compelling. I couldn't find any behavior analytic literature about it. Same with Gestalt language processing. I'm seeing that come up a lot, and that sounds entirely non-behavior analytic at first glance. I have not looked into that one, but I'm kind of doubting that that fits within our scope and our framework. Let's just keep doing ABA, right? And good functional assessments and everything, because I really, really think that the strength of our field is how simple our practice is, right? And that we look at everything through a very different lens than mental health practitioners, like licensed mental health counselors or social workers. And I don't want us to lose that or lose sight of it. It's easy to get derailed with these other things, like right now it's pandas. Trauma-informed care was a thing I spoke a lot about, that we need to be aware of it. But Also, if you're doing a good functional assessment, you are by definition doing trauma-informed care. And if you knew there were punishing stimuli, you would not include those in a treatment plan. You would probably avoid them, so as not to recondition the problem. And that is a lot of trauma-informed care, right? So I feel like a lot of it can be very distracting and take your time and energy away from things that will be more helpful to the client, and takes away from what makes our field so strong and awesome. So that is my thing on pandas and all kind of like mentalistic constructs that are trendy right now. Okay. I need your help. Please provide me with resources and articles that can help me explain to guardians and other team members who have no background in ethics why we should not restrict primary reinforcers. This is such a good question. Okay, I'm going to take a sip and then I'm going to answer the question. All right, my excitement is rekindled. I did a workshop at ABBA last May called, I don't remember what I called it, but it was about pink flags, which I invented. I have all this stuff that I need to write up as a follow-up article to the one I published in 23 with Joe Veneziano, that They Have a Voice. But it's another ethical construct I was going through. And pink flags, right, are warning signs that what you're doing isn't definitely unethical, right? Like you may not find that exact thing in the ethics code or an example in the Bailey and Birch book, but you're in ethically iffy territory, right? Like you should ask yourself questions about what you're doing because it may not be great and it might not be obvious that it has ethical concerns. So that's pink flags. And this is a pink flag. We don't restrict primary reinforcers. So I called these inalienable reinforcers to kind of be sisters or brothers or whatever to inalienable rights. Although I have a hard time saying inalienable, apparently. But these primary reinforcers are what I called inalienable reinforcers. For example, if it's your birthday, unless you like murdered someone that morning, like you get to have your birthday party, you get to have your birthday cake. Like I worked with kids in foster care and they would do sometimes things that were really, really bad, like really bad behavior that the parents wanted to do something about. And that was usually like a totally reasonable thing. But I would tell the foster parents and the biological parents, like, no one loses access to their birthday party privileges. No one loses access to the birthday cake. Like, if you celebrate Christmas, then you get to have Christmas morning kind of no matter what you do, right? Like, these I consider primary reinforcers because if you restrict them, then you are degrading someone's quality of life, honestly, and you're going to get ratio strain. If you're restricting primary reinforcers. Also, if you're saying basic primary reinforcers, that's like food and beverages. You can't really restrict those unless there's like a really pressing health and safety concern. It's different when you work with kids, which I believe someone already mentioned in the comment. I haven't read through all of them yet. With kids, you can, like you're allowed, again, just because you can doesn't mean you should or that it's ethical. With kids, you can restrict these things, but I don't think it's very helpful. Maybe briefly while they're learning kind of more skills for how much to eat and portion control and other replacement behaviors for self-soothing, right? If that's why they might be overeating or things like that. Like you can do it, but it doesn't mean you should, right? So generally speaking, like when I worked with adults, you can't restrict these things because they buy their own groceries with their own money. And here's what I would tell the parents and the clinicians that would get like really upset about this. I had like a lot of adults that had diabetes or pre-diabetes because they didn't always make the healthiest decisions for food and exercise. However, all of us, like me talking, everyone watching this right now, you know, you get to make bad decisions for yourself. I can right now go like a family size bag of Doritos and a whole bottle of whiskey and just eat the whole thing and drink the whole bottle if I wanted to. I truly don't, because that would make waking up at 5 tomorrow horrible. But if I wanted to do that, I could. I am an adult and I can make my own bad decisions. And very few people are going to stop me, right? If I was like rapidly gaining massive weight and people were worried about my health, like someone might talk to me once or twice, but for the most part, I could make these bad decisions. And that's part of life. And it goes into like, how do we get to say what a good life is, right? And what the best parts of life are. Like for me, you can probably tell I'm skinny, like eating is fine. Like it's not that super reinforcing for me. So it's easy for me to manage my weight. That's not like my big reinforcer in life where I like spend all this time looking forward to a meal and things like that. But for some people it is, right? So I had a client who had, well, I won't give his diagnosis because that might make it obvious who he was. Probably not. But anyway, he had a neurological disorder and he liked cooking. And the neurological disorder he had, I'll just say it's the same thing I have. It's multiple sclerosis. He wasn't able to cook anymore. He wasn't able to walk. He had a lot of trouble speaking. He had always enjoyed cooking. He enjoyed like gourmet food, having a glass of wine with his dinner. And he was in the brain injury group home because he was on the waiver for brain injuries. And, towards the end, his ability to swallow was impaired. So he was told that he would have to have thicket. Like it's this stuff that they put you just put the dinner in the blender, you press puree basically, and then you add thicket to change the texture to prevent choking or aspiration pneumonia, which is when you breathe a piece of food into your lungs and then bacteria gets in there. And all of us like do that once in a while and it will not give you pneumonia. But if your immune system is not functioning properly or is impaired for some reason, or you're just very elderly, which causes kind of immune system impairment, then it can create a pneumonia infection that is often fatal. Like I worked with end-of-life care for years with adults, and pneumonia is a lot of people's like the last thing they have kind of when they're very elderly and everything's starting to shut down. So anyway, he said, I don't care if I get aspiration pneumonia. This is the one thing I enjoy. It makes me happy. It makes my life worth living. All the other things I love to do, I can't do anymore. So I'm going to eat my food and I'm aware of the risks. I understand them. If I get pneumonia, I get pneumonia. That's fine with me. And this was after he was in his home for at least 10 years. I knew him really well. I screened him at least 3 times. He was in his right mind. He wasn't especially depressed. He understood the risks, and that's the decision he made, and I supported it. I was the clinical director at the time. I probably could have gotten something that forced him to have the thicket, but I didn't feel like that was right. And that's related to this kind of primary reinforcers, right? If I restrict something that crucial to his happiness, I'm going to get like a ratio strain because he's going to have a lack of reinforcement overall. So there's just going to be other sneaky behaviors to try to get that same reinforcer or something very similar to it. So what you end up getting are essentially the side effects of punishment when you restrict primary reinforcers. And if it's for potables, which are things you drink, or edibles, which most of us know are food, you shouldn't restrict them. But if someone is that motivated to get them where you're thinking about restricting it, like you can get a blood test for Prader-Willi. I've had multiple clients with that, and they will eat literally until their stomach explodes and they can die of sepsis, right? They are so hungry all the time. It's like a powerful, intense, motivating operation that is not temporary. It is there 100% of the time. They will take food wrappers out of the trash and eat it if there's like the taste of food still on the wrapper. They always feel like they're starving to death, and it makes me so sad. So I'd want them tested for Prader-Willi. Are they on an antipsychotic? Some of those can make people super hungry. And if you play with that, or even the time of day you take it or talk to the prescriber, you can work it out that way. I've had multiple clients diagnosed with polydipsia, which is just drinking a lot of water. But when I say a lot, I mean like one person, well, all of them try to drink out of the toilet bowl once you restrict the water. One person pulled a pipe out of the wall in the shower. Why were we restricting it as a primary reinforcer? Because with polydipsia, people will drink so much water, they either die or have a seizure because it's like the same reason you shouldn't drink salt water. It dilutes the sodium and potassium in your bloodstream, and then your nerves can't fire and you have a seizure. So that was a very long-winded way for me to answer why you shouldn't restrict primary reinforcers. I gave a 3-hour workshop on that in May. And I need to write it up. I just don't have time to do all the things that I would like to do. But I will post a link to this video in your post so that you can see what I said, because I don't know if you're here right now. Actually, I don't know how to tell who's here. Okay. Does anyone have an assessment tool for Medicaid? No, I don't really do anything with insurance. Let's see. Resources to executive functioning for young kids. What's executive functioning as a behavior analyst? Like, I kind of know what you mean, but let's be careful with our language, right? Do you mean like ordering when to do things, how to take things out? Do they need better behavior chains? Do they need a behavior chain of how to follow instructions and how to follow a list? What are the foundational skills? Like these phrases like pandas and executive function, like it sounds like we know what we're saying, but if we try to define it operationally, many of us mean totally different things. So that's why I said this is kind of like murky territory to get into as behavior analysts, and I tend to avoid that stuff. All right, is there a way to shadow a BCBA before you enter your master's program? Kind of. You could get a job as an RBT, right? Or a technician. All right, this post should not be here. Got rid of that. Okay. Process of researching how to run a private school tailored to those with autism. Not a center or day treatment. I don't know how to incorporate billing. I don't do insurance billing. I never know which FAST to use, as I know there are multiple options. The most accurate one. Okay, I commented on this one, and there was another post just like this yesterday that got taken down. So this is kind of interesting. If you read the article, like the actual journal article that Iwata published the FAST in, because he's the one who wrote that tool, he basically wrote in there saying like, hey, me and Mike Dorsey invented the analog assessment, right? Like functional analysis is their whole thing. So he's like, if anyone's good at it, it's me. Like I'm the best person in the whole world at this because I invented like the most accurate way that we do it, or co-invented. So he's like, I'm going to make one of these screening tools, because at that time it was the MAS and the QABF that were out. The FAST didn't exist yet. He made it to prove a point that those screening tools are wildly inaccurate and do not pin down function nearly as well as an analog or functional analysis. So the short answer is the FAST is the most accurate. Iwata was right. He made the best one. But it's still pretty inaccurate when compared to an actual analog assessment, which was the point he was making, is that we shouldn't use those. Like you can use it like to guide a structured interview because you're just kind of asking questions about the function. If insurers want it, it doesn't hurt. But I've had so many really good clinicians graph their results and be like, oh no, the FAST is saying there's a different function than what I thought was the function. And like 10 times out of 10, the BCBA has the right function in mind. And you can see why there's errors. The FAST skews toward attention, I want to say. They all skew towards one function. No, the MAS skews towards attention. Anyway, but like if you run an assessment tool, the MAS, the FAST, the QABF, first, you may as well use the FAST. It's the most accurate one. But second, it's like 50-50. I mean, like, don't take the results of it that seriously. And if you don't agree with them, then just trust that you're right. You can look at the questions and how to score it to reverse engineer why a different function might have come out when you ask the questions, and you can see like how things are worded. But I would kind of avoid those. Okay. Relias. Relias is pretty good as a platform. Alrighty. I'm a BCBA and kind of on my own until my company hires a supervisor, so I'm asking for tips, boundaries when attending school meetings with clients' families. Am I allowed to give recommendations when the school isn't taking the parents seriously with their needs for the child, or is this overstepping my role? Thanks in advance. Oh, good. There's lots of comments on this, so hopefully she got some help already. I would say this is a tricky position to be in. You could give recommendations, but like, how involved are you with this client? How involved can you be in the future? Are you familiar with the rest of the treatment team and what they're doing? Are you stepping on anybody's toes? And like, are you setting up a situation for yourself that's manageable that you can kind of keep track of? So it could be overstepping. It could not be overstepping. You're saying the school isn't taking the parents' needs seriously, but have you also talked to the people at the school that aren't taking it seriously and seeing kind of what they're saying? Because, often there's a reason they might be saying something like that, I hope. If there's no reason, that's kind of terrible. But I would say if it's your first IEP, especially with a client that you don't know very well, I wouldn't talk a lot during the IEP. I would take notes and make mental notes to myself and make follow-up items to discuss. But anything you wanted to discuss in the IEP that isn't in the existing one, if it's not like a brand new first IEP meeting, I would kind of like talk to the treatment team and the parents about before the meeting. But again, that's really time intensive. So if you're kind of on your own and waiting for a supervisor, your caseload's probably overburdened. So I don't know if you're going to have time to do any of that stuff. So yeah, I don't know boundaries with who, but it's easy to relax your boundaries with clients and their immediate family. And that's kind of how we burn out in the field. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. You're trying to do a lot of good and working really hard, it sounds like. Just be careful that you're not taking on way too much. And if you're worried about overstepping or recommendations, ask to see the IEP from last year, because the one from this year is never like wildly different. And go talk to the providers at school if you're there. Like, there's probably the SLP who's there all the time, or the special ed teacher, right? And go see what's going on with them and why they're not taking these parents' concerns very seriously. Because you do want like as much information as you can possibly get. All right, this one got a lot of comments, but I don't know anything about resources for non-binary trans clients. I know how to do it. I know that getting certified by Elevatus, their curriculum on sexuality, has like the gingerbread man and all of that stuff. I learned all about it. I've walked clients through it before, but I did it very individualized. I do everything very individualized. I very rarely use resources that are just like blanket, like this is about being non-binary, but I'm sure there's good books and stuff. The comment section there got a little hairy. I had to shut it off. Okay, we'll do one more question. Data collection software. I don't know. I'm cheap. I just use Excel or Microsoft. Let's see. I have a client who's continually dysregulated. What does that mean? Right? Like, is he always having tantrums? Is he having issues? All right. So at school, we offer continuous breaks. We are using timers, countdowns, and sensory input replacements. What's that a replacement behavior for? Is that a diet or replacement behaviors for a specific thing? But okay. But he continues to display aggression and tantrum behavior. The classroom routine is inconsistent, which I believe to be part of the issue. Home is severe in terms of disorder, and there's no structure or routine. Parents don't speak English, and I don't have access to a translator consistently, and Google Translate only gets me so far. That's a huge problem already, because how did you get informed consent? You need a translator. Like, you need, not a translator, you need an interpreter. Interpreting is different than translation. An interpreter will make sure that like the essence of what you're trying to say gets across, and like accommodates for idioms in all the different languages. I've never felt comfortable at all using Google Translate to train behavior plans, to even do like interviews for functional assessment purposes. If it's not a language I'm fluent in, or at least like know pretty well, because you don't, if you're using Google Translator, you don't know how well it's going, and you can't really tell what your clients are saying to you. So I would say demand, if it's a school, I mean, the school district can definitely offer an interpreter. It might take a while, but get that first. That's my first thing to do before anything else. All right, his school is not equipped with a sensory room for additional inputs. Home is also not equipped. I'm wondering if this child will benefit from medication at this point due to the severity of sensory needs. what is a sensory need and sensory input? We're not computers, like this is, again, sensory diets sound good in OT. They're not evidence-based. Unless a person is like stimming so much they're hurting themselves, like if they're rubbing this and they're like chafing and they're going to need splints or like posy mitts or something. I don't know what sensory input replacements would be or why you would need a sensory room necessarily. If it's an escape function, having someplace to go to take a break that's quiet might be good, but that doesn't have to be a sensory room. I don't know what additional inputs are. Does he like talking to people? Is that attention? Is it automatic? Like, this is nothing about function, so I don't really know how to help you, and you can't recommend medication or not because you're not a physician. We don't prescribe medication. You might recommend they consult with a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist if you think that's necessary. But I would go back to your assessment and really tease out the function much more here because I haven't seen you mention it. So I'm not sure we've exhausted all behavior analytic treatment possibilities in this case just yet. So what I would do, get an interpreter so you know exactly what the parents are saying, because you would miss in translation some stuff, and you work for a school district, so they can definitely pay for that. And they have them. You can do it on video, like live video. If that's the barrier, that's fine. There's lots of like agencies that only do interpreting. Just like you get ASL, if your client was deaf or hard of hearing, you'd have a sign language interpreter. You need an interpreter for whatever the client and their family's primary language is at home. Otherwise, you're not going to have an idea what's going on. So do that. Get a really good functional assessment. Figure out the function. Treat the function. Stop thinking about sensory inputs and all of this stuff. And if the sensory room benefits him, why? Right? Like, is it escape? Is that why he liked the sensory room? Because he just wants a quiet place to be away from demands. That's escape function. Is it automatic? Right? Like, we need to figure out a lot more with what is going on when you say sensory, because we're getting kind of lost in mentalisms, and that is not where we want to be. Okay, that was enough of me talking, I think. I have not nearly finished my beer. I may not. It's been a long day. But I will see you again in 2 weeks. I'm going to do these every 2 weeks instead of weekly. That was a little more than I could manage. So I will see you in 2 weeks. All the dates are on my site if you wanted to see them. But there's the permalink that you can always use, like at Dr. Chebier Live. So I hope to see you here in 2 weeks on the 17th at the same time. And that's it. Have a great one.